Recently, Microsoft upgraded some of its backwards compatible games to support Xbox One X, and I wanted to take a look at one of them today. Splinter Cell Conviction is a game that suffered from some technical flaws on its original platform, but there's a good game here and some interesting visual designs, stuff that we really haven't seen in recent games. So I wanted to go back and explore it on Xbox One X, check it out on Xbox One S, and see how they all stack up against the original 360 version. And to do that, I am joined by none other than Richard Ledbetter.
Hey, how's it all going, John?
Pretty good. I've been sneaking through the shadows, playing with the most grizzled Sam Fisher there is.
You should refund his money. Where do I find him?
This is Michael Ironside's last appearance in the Splinter Cell series, and it's a game that I am rather fond of, which is why I opted to look at this one out of the 3 Splinter Cell games that were just made available for X.
Right, got you. Yeah, I think we should explain that these releases come out of nowhere and we never really know when they're going to arrive, and obviously we're in the middle of other projects when they do. So yes, it's not ideal, and that explains why this and coverage of Ninja Gaiden 2, which people are really excited about, just haven't been able to get around to it yet. But yes, Conviction, we're looking at this one first, and it's got a remarkable history, really, hasn't it?
Yes, it does. So this is a game that was in development for, I think, somewhere around 5 years in its original form. And when it was first announced, it actually was a very different looking game. It seemed to be taking a more open world approach. You had Hobo Sam Fisher in there, a very different visual design. And then that version kind of just disappeared for a while. They went underground, and then when they resurfaced at E3, they brought what we know as Conviction today. And there are some really neat and impressive visual effects and elements going on here. But first, I guess this is kind of running on modified Unreal Engine technology, but second generation Unreal, not Unreal Engine 3, which was more common last generation.
Yeah, almost ubiquitous, really. The amount of titles that used UE3 was just... But I guess with a game like this, which was in development for so long, it would have had a lot of legacy underpinnings.
Exactly. But in the end, they modified it a lot, and I believe it was renamed sort of like the LED engine, if you will. Which, hey, that fits Splinter Cell pretty well. But the focus here was on dynamic lights and shadows, as you'd expect from Splinter Cell. So all the lights are dynamic. You can still shoot out lights as you would expect. It's a very dynamic world, and I love to use that word, dynamic. It just fits. But they also had some other interesting things. So back in 2010, I think it was when this was released, ambient occlusion was still relatively new. I mean, screen space ambient occlusion had appeared in Crysis in late 2007, but we were just beginning to see it in console games, and they came up with sort of a pseudo-baked solution, but that could still be updated in real time. It's really neat. So there's some really nice ambient occlusion in this. And then there's also the 2 things I want to mention here that really stand out to me still today are, one, the projected videos and text. You've seen that, right? It's like mission objectives and flashbacks and other sort of things that are important to the mission are projected across buildings at a distance, and often at like a large scale. And at the time I was kind of blown away by this. It's a very creative visual choice, and it still kind of holds up, and seeing it again reminded me like, hey, we haven't really seen this again. And it doesn't fit every game, obviously, but it looks really cool.
You actually see similar things in movies these days where they map labels and subtitles into the environments. And you kind of saw it here first.
Exactly. That's actually a good point. You're right. It does sometimes show up in films these days, but not so much in games. Though another thing that this does really well that we do see in games is the seamless transition from gameplay to cutscene.
Right.
This was really kind of uncommon back then, and Splinter Cell does it quite well, where it's like, you just move into position, you're just playing the game, you grab somebody, you perform an action, and the game is able to seamlessly jump into a real-time cutscene. And it just looks awesome, and there's some pretty brutal sequences here, like this restroom sequence. I think this was first shown at E3, where it's like, he's sort of like putting the guy's head up to the sink, and he punches him so hard that it breaks the sink apart. It's just like, it's brutal. It looks cool though, and this room also has working mirrors, by the way, which We can't take working mirrors for granted.
It sounds rather like that sequence in Mission Impossible Fallout. They have a big toilet room showdown there, don't they?
So yeah, Splinter Cell Conviction was sort of foretelling the future of cinema, if you will.
Yeah, it's ahead of the curve. But
exactly.
Technically,
yes. Technically, you did play some of this originally on 360, I believe, as well.
I did, yeah, but not that much. I played the playable demo, and I don't really have that much of a memory around it. I remember it was stylistically cool, and I remember that the image quality was pretty decent, but when you did the pixel count, the resolution, even for that era, was remarkably low.
Yes, that's right. So, and this is one of the flaws with the 360 version. It comes in at 1024 by 576, which is, I guess, it's kind of odd. We still see numbers like this thrown around when talking about Switch games, actually. So, you know, but still, it looks kind of chunky, but it's slightly improved by the fact that this is a game with 2x MSAA, which is really uncommon still. And that is what plays nicely with the enhanced Xbox One X version. So, due to the way that, I guess it's like a 9x jump in resolution, right? So 3x in each axis.
Yeah, that's right. They call it the Haichi method, where they, you're exactly right, they enhance the resolution by a factor of 3 in each axis. So, 720p becomes 4K, but this is not 720p, it's sub-native, so you get a sub-native 4K resolution. But the improvement's still quite profound, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the pixel count here is 3072 by 1728, which is actually a pixel count we've seen in plenty of games this generation. And when you couple that with 2x MSAA, it's kind of completely transforms the game. What was once like a pixelated mess is now super clean and sharp, and it looks awesome.
Awesome. That's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess from there we need to talk about performance, because this was a bit of a tear fest on the original hardware, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's actually that's kind of the secondary complaint. And, for as nice as the game looked, the low resolution combined with the performance did hurt the Xbox 360 version. It targets 30 frames per second and often dips below it, and it uses an adaptive VSync, so you get plenty of tearing. And, some of the mission areas are fine, but larger areas or, some of the dynamic, I guess, cutscene sequences are not very smooth at all on the Xbox 360. But over on Xbox One X, it is almost entirely cleaned up. It's not perfect, but it basically gets... I'd say it's like 99% there in terms of just it delivers 30 frames per second very evenly, and yeah, it feels much more fluid as a result. I mean, as fluid as 30 frames per second can be.
Yeah, basically you're quite right. It cleans up the original issues in just about every regard. The resolution issue is resolved, and because you've got the 2x MSAA, it looks pretty good. And performance, no more tearing. That's pretty much common on all backwards compatibility titles, whether it's S or X. But obviously with that huge resolution upgrade, this looks pretty good, I reckon.
Yeah, exactly. And as you say, Xbox One S benefits as well. I don't think we tested this originally either. And that version, of course, still runs at 576p, but the performance is much smoother overall, with just a few dips here and there, and of course no tearing. So even in that form, it's a huge improvement. Mm-hmm. But, between them, it's really neat to see this massive upgrade. And I guess the only complaint I should mention is with the performance side, is you do occasionally see some 16 millisecond spikes here and there where a new frame appears exactly after a previous frame. There's no like the typical duplicate frame persistence that you get in 30 FPS. So it can add a little judder occasionally, but it's not like bad frame pacing. It doesn't crop up that often, so it's not really a big deal. What is a big deal, though, are, well, sort of, the pre-rendered cutscenes. Now, these are atrocious, and they were awful on PC, they were awful on 360, and they're still terrible now.
Wow.
I don't know what they were thinking, but they've used, I'm sure they're just Bink videos, but they're very poorly encoded, and they all run at 20 frames per second for some reason.
What?
Yeah, and I don't understand why this is, but yeah, the frame rate, they're 20 FPS FMV sequences, and they're super blurry, and like the gamma looks wrong. I mean, they're just awful, and so they use these to hide loading, right? And they do a neat job of sort of, they'll have like a camera pan in the pre-rendered scene, and then like pass by like a large like object, and then snap to real time to give the impression of a seamless transition. But because you're going from like a 20 FPS super low res video to real time, it's kind of, doesn't really work that well in the end. And I'm not really I mean, I guess because they were trying to hide loading behind these videos, maybe they just needed to keep the profile on the CPU kind of really low to avoid issues with playback. But yeah, that is kind of a blemish on an otherwise now beautiful game.
Well, that's a bit disappointing. I was going to say there's not much you can do about that, but then I was thinking about Final Fantasy 13, where they did actually go back.
Exactly. But in that case, though, they had access to those PlayStation 3 assets, which were much higher quality. Here, I mean, even on PC, the video quality is poor, but at least they play back correctly. I remember playing this on PC, where video playback is sometimes iffy in games, and they were even less smooth than they should be. It was just kind of this inconsistent persistence in playback. Pretty nasty stuff. But, again, not a huge deal. It's just the interstitial cutscenes. But the game itself, it's interesting. I wanted to revisit this one because I really do like Blacklist, of course, and maybe I'll look at that sometime. But this one really stood out to me, as it's got a really interesting flow to it. It's not so much the tight Splinter Cell or rigid Splinter Cell. It's almost a little more arcadey. Essentially, when you do stealth kills, you gain these little power-ups, I guess you can use, that allow you to mark targets and then hit a button to just automatically execute them. And maybe that's a little bit cheap, but it feels pretty neat, like rolling into a room, grabbing a guy as a human shield, popping off two guys just automatically, and then taking out that guy. It feels like you kind of flow through the scene like water almost. So it gives it this really fast-paced, almost action-gamey feel while still being a stealth game, which is, it's fun to play. I just had a good time going through the levels and sort of tackling it that way.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, really, because, on two counts. First of all, do the assets hold up when they've been increased in resolution 9 times? And secondly, does the game still hold up?
Yeah, well, asset-wise, it's interesting. I found that from a distance, like during normal gameplay angles, things hold up fairly well. Textures are a little bit on the low-res side, I guess. But it's still an attractive enough-looking game, even if, the lighting and such is obviously dated by today's standards, but it still looks nice. But some of the close-ups and the cutscenes, you can now kind of really make out the textures on the faces and whatnot, and they're not super high-res looking. It does kind of reveal limitations of that era. So it's not like one of the best games of visual games of that generation necessarily, but it's still a handsome looking game. And bumping up the resolution, you're basically getting like PC quality visuals, just about. Not all the way. The PC version is probably still the superior way to play it, provided it doesn't have any weirdness with Windows 10. You never know.
Yeah, there is that. But gameplay-wise, you just had a lot of fun with it, and it still holds up, right?
Yeah, mostly, except for there's this one level where you kind of go to the Middle East, and it's like Sam having flashbacks to his military days. And it's like, let's just get rid of all the stealth, well, mostly, and have you tote around like an AK-47 and just blasting guys. The gunplay during that segment is not very good. It's a very strange choice. That's kind of one weak level out of an otherwise strong game. So not a huge deal, but it is something that stuck out to me replaying it. But it's also the spot that has the most consistent amount of performance dips that I found. And even on X, you could drop the frame rate a little bit during those scenes. Okay. So yeah, I think they were just riffing on the popularity of like Modern Warfare at the time.
Right.
This is like post Call of Duty 4 and Modern Warfare 2 and all that. It's like, we gotta have our brown military level. And they definitely have that.
They could have done a flashback to the hobo period and reused some of those canned assets.
That would have been fantastic. Yeah, because that. Yeah, they need to be self-aware with some of those old prototypes. That'd be great. but yeah, aside from that, honestly, it's a great little shooter. It's a cool game, cool stealth game, a little different from the traditional Splinter Cell games. It does kind of feel like a bridge point between classic Splinter Cell and then what would become Blacklist. But if you've missed Splinter Cell and also missed Michael Ironside as Sam Fisher, it's still a great way to go. And also, shout out to the fantastic dialogue in this game. The voice actors, especially on the enemies.
Admiring the paintings? Fuck you!
It is tremendous. These guys, they have a very foul mouth.
Holy shit! Whoa, man! I'm in the painting with your fucking blood! Come out and show yourself, fuckface! You're dead now, bitch!
And they get very angry at Sam Fisher taking out their guys, and they express themselves in some interesting verbal ways that I found extremely entertaining. Mm-hmm. It's not. I'd forgotten about that aspect of the game, and it does give it a different feel than you might be used to, because these guys just don't stop talking, and they are always cursing.
And is it sort of compatible or incompatible with Xbox's new community guidelines?
See, I'm not sure it is, so there might be an issue there, but they didn't change anything, so that's key. If you want to experience those original quips, you can do it.
Awesome. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's pretty much it. It's a great upgrade. It's one of the better upgrades I've seen recently for it, and even parts of the UI scale nicely up to this higher resolution. The whole thing, it almost feels like a native conversion to Xbox One X, basically, which is kind of the highest praise you could give something like this. So yeah, great version of the game. If you're interested in checking it out, I do recommend it, but I think that's going to wrap it up for now. So thanks for joining me, Richard.
No props.
And if you did enjoy this video, as always, be sure to like and subscribe. Ring that notification bell at the top to always receive updates on the latest videos posted on our channel. And of course, if you want to hear more about Splinter Cell and Sam Fisher's shenanigans, do follow us over on Twitter, and we'll be happy to discuss that anytime. So until next time, this is John and Rich signing off.